I think in terms of the electric, I think the electric sort of plant side will grow and grow. We'll have more fully electric fleets, without doubt, more fully electric fleets in 5 years' time.
Hello and welcome to CheckProof's Breaking Ground podcast. I'm Andrew Kanasagi, Media Relations Manager here at CheckProof, and joined by Guy Woodford, incoming Editor-in-Chief at Quarry Management Journal. Guy will share his take on the aggregate and wider construction materials industry through the lens of an editor who's covered the industry for years. Guy, a very warm welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Delighted to be here, Andrew.
Oh, you've spent years at the center of industry storytelling, from Aggregates business magazine to now Quarry Management Journal. How did you end up covering our industry and the quarrying sector?
Well, I started in newspapers. I graduated in journalism and had quite a long career in regional newspapers, daily. Started on a weekly and then 3 daily newspapers. And I enjoyed it thoroughly, reporting on all different subjects. But I got to the point where I felt I'd done everything I wanted to do in that area. I wanted to do something in other forms of journalism. I was very interested in business journalism, industry journalism. An opportunity came up with Route One Publishing to work across their titles, which included Aggregates business.
Nice.
So I sort of jumped on that and joined that. I liked the idea of all the travel that was associated with the job. I took the editor's job at Aggregates business in July 14. After ConExpo of that year. And then I did that for 11 and a half years, and have now obviously joined up with Quarry Management Journal, the QMJ group, as their incoming editor-in-chief. It's a newly created role with a great setup, great magazine, and obviously they're the hosts of the Hillhead exhibition, highly successful show going for many, many years now. A brilliant show, a brilliant industry showcase. So having a busy start to this new role.
How big is the quarry and aggregates industry as well?
We're talking about an industry with about over 200,000 quarries globally. It generates a turnover of about $400 billion a year. It employs 3 million people. I mean, it's truly crucial to our way of life, and it's a huge industry and a huge revenue earner for various governments.
Yeah. So is that what keeps you sort of interested in this sector year after year, just the different markets that you see? What is it that keeps your interest peaked?
I think it's been an evolving market. The rise of digitalisation, the huge emphasis on sustainability is so paramount. The AI coming on board, there's so much there of interest, and also quarrying also benefits a lot from downstream from mining. So mining on the tech, mining on a lot of the digital side, the use of apps to control things to help you run sites. A lot of that starts in mining and comes down to quarrying. And that's been very noticeable and very interesting. That's a notable trend that I've found.
So over the last decade, has there been like one site or something particular that's really impressed you?
I think that the most impressive technology has been very impressive, and obviously more so in some markets than others. The sustainability sort of, if you like, the sort of global progress in the industry has really taken off in some markets like China. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal what they're doing on the sort of green quarry side of things. I went out a few years ago to cover the China Aggregates Association International Conference that they put on in Wuxi. This was just before COVID, so late 2019. And done all the interviews, covered the conference, a lot on sustainability. And someone at the conference mentioned this amazing green quarry in about 2 provinces away. So we're talking, I don't know, 5-6 hour drive. So I said, wow, it would be great to come back and cover that one time. And of course, because you're there as an international journalist, no problem, we'll arrange a driver, we'll take you there tomorrow. So I got to go the next day with an interpreter, saw this most incredible site where all the workers were living on the site, huge production. I think it was limestone, electric plant throughout the site, everything electrically powered, a lot of it's automated. They even had, they had a farm for the workers' food, so they would have the farm there. I mean, you couldn't get lower sort of food mileage, could you really? The workers eating from the farm, and it was processed. And some of the waste materials, so they would wash a lot of the materials, so they had very up-to-date wash plant solutions. The waste materials were then being turned into ceramics. So the workers were making ceramics out of this waste. And there was
Wow.
a
Yeah.
museum for this. And you're looking at it and you're thinking, this is absolutely incredible. If this was
Yeah.
done by a Western company, it would rightly be all the talk of the industry. But this is going on in China. And
Yeah.
if it wasn't for me being there and sort of asking, can I see it? And them having an interpreter, the wider world might not have known about it, and obviously I did a big
No.
feature on it. And
Yeah.
that's an example of being in this job, that you can have access to so many markets and learned a lot about what other countries are doing that you wouldn't necessarily have if you weren't, covering the international scene.
So you mentioned sustainability. From what
Yeah.
you're seeing globally, what do you think is actually moving the sustainability needle and what's still sort of early stage?
I think very much it's a mixture of regulation, industry directed regulation, government directed regulation, and also companies wanting to do the right thing. They want to be green, they want to be seen to be green, and rightly so, and
Yeah.
celebrate all their successes, what they've done,
Yeah.
and they're also very aware of working with the local communities. They
Okay.
want to be
Yeah.
seen as good neighbours, work very closely with them, support community initiatives. A lot of quarries, certainly, obviously in the UK, I'm now, in the UK market covering it extensively. A lot of the majors and the likes of, the Wholesome UKs, the Heidelberg Materials UKs, the Bredens, the Tarmacs, all have very good community relations, doing a lot on sponsoring maybe local sports sides. They do lots of sort of environmental, say, litter days, picking up, cleaning up local communities.
Mm,
Their staff get involved in that. I think that's great work. This
yeah.
is really good work. And I think that sort of thing is often overlooked, with the national media coverage, and
Yeah.
the industry sometimes gets a bad rap it absolutely doesn't deserve. There's
Yeah.
so much good work, and the essential nature of mineral products and
Yeah.
building products. They are so
Yeah.
essential to our daily life. If we didn't have quarries,
Yeah.
we didn't have quarries
Yeah.
processing the materials, what do we have? We
Yeah.
don't have
Exactly.
infrastructure. We can't maintain our quality of life. Speeding up the permitting process is a huge issue. You need skilled people in planning departments. There's a lot of people who've retired. I talk to a lot of people in the industry. There's a lot of talk of expertise leaving the industry because of retirements, either not being replaced, or those that are left have to do a lot more. So it takes longer to get approvals for new sites and to extend the use of existing quarries. And that really has to change. We've got to drive the approvals process forward, because companies, quarry operators, they can produce an increased amount of material, but they need to get obviously the right permitting in
The right
place,
permits and
and
times.
the
Yeah.
authorities need to make that happen for them. There
Yeah.
needs to be that joined up thinking.
You mentioned in a previous conversation we had is creating conditions for recycled materials and processing tech.
So it's a question of changing regulation, changing government legislation, which then opens that market for more recycled materials to be used. And then that also obviously opens the market for OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, to supply the solutions, whether it's crushers, screeners, wash plants, and associated technology that can service a new recycling market.
Yeah.
But that's been
Yeah.
very noticeable, and I've had meetings with manufacturers who talk specifically about Saudi Arabia, the Middle East as a whole, UAE, as being a very attractive new market in that sustainability area.
Okay. So do you think that green premium materials are still, though niche, or becoming sort of a real commercial lever?
No,
What do you think?
I think they're becoming a big commercial lever. I had a very interesting interview with a senior figure at Wholesome UK, and he was emphasising the fact that their percentage of overall sales, the percentage of green products within their overall
Mm.
sales, had gone up rapidly. So while overall sales had been
Okay.
fairly stagnant or maybe slightly less, the percentage of green sales have gone up notably. And obviously, with
Mm.
those green product sales, they come at a premium price. It can't be pure ideology. There needs to be the business case. And
Yeah.
if you can marry the two together, that's an absolute winner.
Yeah. And how different do you feel the picture is across the different regions that you cover? So, like, in terms of these recycled materials, like, how is Scandinavia different from Europe or versus the US, for example?
Yeah, Scandinavia is very, very good, as is the Netherlands, Belgium, countries like that. UK is very good on the recycling sustainability agenda. They really, really strong, really strong. America, the East and West Coast America, again, growing in strength. But then you get more into America, and there's not the same drive on the recycling side. A lot of that is because, again, the virgin aggregate cost is reasonable. So
Yeah.
it's like the American driver with the gasoline. Gas is cheap. Why the hell do I want an electric? You want a greener planet. I understand, but you've also got to have the business case, because people invest it in this first to create the capex to give you, if you like, greener equipment, but then it's got to start paying for itself. So then you've got to create the business case. So that's exciting, because then
That
that
is
will drive
exciting.
an increase in circularity, an increase in adoption of those practices, which leads to lower carbon emissions.
So, safety is front and center of this industry. Can you give examples of innovations that have really sort of blown you away?
I mean, I've seen some excellent sort of examples. I was on the amongst the judges for the latest Sustainable Development Awards for Aggregates Europe, the European Aggregates Association, and there were some great entries there. For instance, there was a really good one, I think it was from Tarmac, where they're doing a lot on dust suppression at this particular site, where there's a lot of sensors used, a lot of technology used, registered constantly in real time dust levels, and adjusting how that they're dealing with this, an automated adjustment of how
That's
they're suppressing
fantastic.
dust on site. I mean, how
Yeah.
good is that? You're
Yeah.
marrying technology,
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and I thought this is great. Another interesting example was various different hazards and how to deal with them was turned into a board game. It was a Portuguese company where they created a board game out of various health and safety elements. And I know from working with Aggregates Europe, working obviously when I come to the States with NSSGA and with the American edition of Aggregates Business, working with the MPA in the UK, and other associations around the world, it is a huge emphasis of the industry association to promote health and safety best practice, and it's a huge emphasis of their members, major and medium to small enterprises, to promote it. So I think they're getting it much more right than wrong.
So you mentioned sort of just how technology was weaved into that sort of health and safety too. But sometimes we sort of as a software company in this industry can kind of feel that digital adoption can be a bit slow, and slower certainly than in other industries. What do you think? Do you agree? And do you think then, if so, is it the tech, the trust, the business case, the culture, or just something else
I
that
think it's a
leads to
mixture of
slower adoption?
I think it's a mixture of all that. I think it helps having early adopters. I think if you've got early adopters, and not only early adopters
Yeah.
who a country or that area that you're trying to get business in, they all know X. And X, if X does this, they all look,
Yeah.
they all follow.
Yeah.
There's FOMO, the fear of missing out. You don't want to miss
Yeah.
out. If a
No.
competitor that has used this piece of software and it's made them more efficient, it's improved health and safety, not only operational efficiency, health and safety. If
Yeah.
you can use some technology to measure a stockpile at distance, to run through a health and safety procedure, to run through your daily checklist, run it more efficiently. I'm not having to go to a particular machine to do certain checks. I can do it remotely.
Yeah.
That's a huge gain. So the right people, being early adopters or endorsing this technology, taking it on and buying into it, is a huge motivator for others. And
Yeah.
and when because people, the quarry operators talk to each other. You could be fiercest rivals, but you're all in the same game. You're
Yeah.
working with similar customers. You see each other at various industry events. Your sort of union events, your association events. People talk and they see how you're doing. If you've invested in a new crusher and screener, the quarry guy down the road's going to know. They're going to see it. They're going to know. And then when they see someone's done it, the FOMO, that business is benefiting financially and their business is improving, their profit margins improving. That's a big motivator.
Yeah.
As it should be in business.
So you mentioned the example of sort of the green quarry in China. Are there any sort of similar markets that have blown you away sort of with tech adoption as well? Any quarry that comes to mind where you really feel like they used state-of-the-art equipment?
Yeah. I mean, I've been to South Korea, which is really interesting market and country, very, very advanced, very sophisticated, like parts of Eastern China and Japan, and they just really get the tech. I went there with a major crushing and screening equipment manufacturer a few years ago, and visited this massive limestone quarry, and was told that this guy really gets the tech and he likes all our stuff. Okay, and I got in there and I got to his office. It was like a Tracy Island from Thunderbirds. It was just screens everywhere, and he was explaining what he loved about the tech, and I'm like, wow, and how it was used on everything from the crushing and screening and conveying, full site operation. This was very much a premium manufacturer, so they could offer very nice, sophisticated. I went to Germany with another major off-highway equipment manufacturer, and this guy, again, not such a big Tracy Island screen, but enough screens, and he's working with this manufacturer to lower his cost per ton, increase productivity, efficiency, lower fuel usage. I mentioned the example on health and safety before about best practice, how you can communicate it. Well, he was communicating all types of things to do with production to all his load and haul staff, all his crushing and screening maintenance team and operators, just basically messaging throughout the day, this is what's going on, this is where you're at. He was looking at his screen, looking at his laptop, could see there was a problem at one of the quarry faces. He could do that instantly because he had the technology, he had his laptop with him, and he dealt with it.
And does that technology adoption then, does that then translate into better bottom line at cost reduction?
I think absolutely. I think the people who are looking at this will say, okay, I find this interesting, but what's my return on investment on it? Naturally you can say, well, how much will it cost up front?
Yes.
And when am I going to see a return on investment? But once they adopt this type of technology and see it not as a threat, they're lowering their cost per ton, improving their bottom line, lowering their cost per ton.
Yeah.
Then they're very much in the room, and that return on investment is pretty rapid, because you're talking about day in, day out changes. Day in, day out, you're using more digitalized, more efficient processes. They quickly mount up those savings by operating, with a digital solution, and they quickly see the returns. And if they're quickly seeing the returns, you're going to get a much better buy-in.
Yeah. So with that, what's the one technology area you feel is possibly a bit undercovered, but that could genuinely be really important and helpful and sort of move the needle?
I think in terms of moving the needle, there's a lot more to obviously come. We're only scratching the surface with AI. Where it goes, there's obviously a lot on automation now, if processes in production of mineral products. And that's very interesting. So obviously AI is being increasingly used within that automated process, but where it goes and how it goes and how long it takes to get there, and again, how will it work in terms of pricing? So how will that work? We're very much in early stages on all of that. But I think as AI develops, how it's relevant to our industry and how it works will be fascinating. I mean, that's an area I'm really excited to find out pros and cons and how that's going to work and how it's going to play out. I have noted that AI is being used a lot in manufacturers' warehousing, their stock management. So they take orders from customers. There's a quicker customers have quicker access to automated responses, which then lead to quicker orders being placed for deliveries of parts and such like. So AI is being heavily used on warehousing and parts ordering. That's been very notable. And then increasingly it will be used more and more in the production process.
Yeah. And so moving on from next generation tech to next generation workforce, What are you hearing about skills gaps and the aging workforce realities and the next generation, and how hard it is to attract the next generation coming into the industry? I'd love your take on this.
It's very much a global issue, without doubt. It's a huge global issue. There's a lot of great work being done on the education side across the world. I mean, I've seen a lot in sort of Western Europe and America, North America. I recently did an interview with a great guy, Brent Moray, the president of the Aggregates producers of Canada, or APAC. He works for Coalesce USA, but he's Canadian. Works in America, but he comes back to Canada regularly, president of this association. He talks a lot about what's being done to get the next workforce. A lot of work being done with new immigrants to Canada. So they're being offered, approached about potential truck driving work. In Ontario, they've created this animated character called Sandy Stone. And Sandy Stone is used to explain how life in a quarry is and what building material is.
Yeah.
And for little kids, they get an understanding. They see all the machines, people go and talk to them, and obviously they go home and tell their parents, and perceptions hopefully of what quarrying and mineral extraction is all about has changed. There's a lot of good work in the UK. Minerals Matter, the Institute of Quarrying, doing a lot in this space. The MPQC on the qualification side, there's like degrees, diplomas you can get at the University of Derby on minerals extraction. A lot of great educational work, and this is mirrored throughout Europe and other parts of the world, to a greater or lesser degree. I think the workforce of tomorrow generally, it is going to be obviously different. There will be a greater emphasis on the digital side, so there's new skills, and I think with the rise of AI, there's also the rise of automated plant. I've been reporting on driverless hauling machines, driverless excavators. These are happening now, and increasingly manufacturers are putting these onto the market as pilots or with certain customers initially. Often it starts with mining and then comes down to quarrying. It's that filtered down. The likes of Luckstone with Caterpillar in America, really interesting stuff on automated hauling. So in terms of tying that in with jobs, it might be that you get more plant operators will be able to work remotely rather than in the cab. They can work remotely, and like a sort of gamer does, you have your joystick and your chair, and you're working your machine remotely. So you're still doing the work, but you benefit from health and safety, and it's a much more comfortable environment. But it's enabling, will enable people who perhaps didn't think of a career in quarrying and minerals extraction to think, I'd quite like doing that. And I quite like the fact that it's more tech-led. I quite like the fact my natural interest in the digital side can be used in a career. And going back to Brent as well, the interview with Brent Moray of APAC in Canada, he said, look, that we've got some very well-paid careers here. This is often overlooked in all this, that you can be very well paid to work in this sector, and very clear ladder. And I think that needs to be, the industry arguably needs to do more to really shout that from the rooftop. Go on the offensive and say,
so raise awareness.
Look at what we can offer here. So I think going back to the original question, a lot of work is being done to get the next generation and a lot more can still be done on the sell, exactly what you can get from it and the variety of the jobs.
Thank you. Now, just to move on to what you look for as an editor, how should producers and companies communicate their news to you to grab attention?
Yeah, I think case studies is always good. We can't get enough case studies, and it's also obviously the humans behind the operation, the quarry manager, the wheel loader worker. When I go to site, if I'm doing a quarry profile, for instance, or a quarry site story, I'm sort of looking at how the overall quarry is operating, step-by-step process. Maybe it's with a particular manufacturer, or there's an angle that I'm looking to sort of go on. But I would try and humanize it as much as possible. So if it's the quarry manager, you focus on him or her, what are they doing there, how they work, and then bring in your angles off that. So you're sort of humanizing the process as much as possible. Then you're looking at all the sort of tech side. I guess this is partly my all experience in newspapers and such like. So, whilst I had, that newspaper journalism background, it's always the sort of human side of bringing stories to life. You get complicated stories about, say, economics or, highly technical stories, and you need that human side to as a nice way in. People
Okay.
relate to other
Yeah,
people. And
they
I
do.
find the same
Yeah.
with this. I like to bring the human side in, and then I'm looking at the technical side.
Yeah, that's lovely. But so as an editor, you'll also obviously get a lot of innovation pitches. What do you feel is real and what do you feel is like hype?
Yeah, well, I think well, we get a lot of claims. We're the best in the world.
Yeah,
Truly
yeah.
groundbreaking, game changing. If you want some of the terminology, this is all comes out. You just have to weed through all that. I mean, if I've seen the amount of stories I've had where a company said X, the global leader in Y and Z. It's like, well, who says you're the global leader? You have to cut it. You have to cut all that out. You get to the
Yeah,
point of X is launching this, or X, you could, I mean, happy to say a leading, a major, if that is the case, or a heavyweight, or even a giant. You can say that, but never you're the best. You were the first to do this. None of that. So you have to be
yeah,
very careful on the language. You have to root out some of that type of stuff from press release and material you get, or at press conferences, for example. Um,
mm,
so yeah, you're careful what you're writing. You stick to the facts. Claims are obviously tested. Your house style, each magazine, each or trade media broadcaster, you have your own house style, and you
yeah,
sort of adjust things to the house style. And increasingly, we obviously accept a lot of good content, and but everyone gets that content. And what you really want is trying to get exclusive lines, one-on-one interviews,
mm,
things that move things forward, that are of interest to your readers, but are also generally breaking information, breaking news. You
yeah,
can't beat that. And I think, again, that's something I brought from my sort of daily regional newspaper days. There's nothing better than being able to break a really interesting story.
yeah.
Who doesn't want that? It's
No,
exciting.
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
interesting,
for
isn't it?
sure.
And yeah,
Yeah,
that should be part
absolutely.
of it. I think that should be part of it, always.
Yeah. So, moving on to the future, if we were to record this episode again in 5 years, what do you expect to have changed on sites, and what do you suspect will still be stubbornly the same?
I think there'll be a lot more on the automation side. I think we'll get some more driverless machines for sure. We get a lot more on
Yeah,
that side. AI will be far more prominent. AI and how it's used to help run quarries, to help operate machine fleets, will be used a lot more to analyze data quickly, efficiently, and then it's acted on by the quarry management. Definitely think there's going to be more on that. There'll be a lot more on the green products. A lot more green products will be produced without doubt. There'll be new innovations around that. There'll be a lot more on the health and safety side. Some of that through more automated processes, so you need less employees on site. That's a natural
yeah,
gain from that.
yeah,
Very much on that. There's obviously already some manufacturers that are offering fully electric fleets. Lugong have come big in from China, going big in Europe. They're offering fully electric fleets. They're doing a lot of work with major players, certainly in the UK with the likes of Holcim UK. That's been a big note, and that's going to grow. More and more manufacturers offering fully electric lines. Um, and the likes of Volvo do a hell of a lot on the sustainable and electric side. I know Volvo have done a lot on that on the hauling side, fossil-free bodies and really interesting stuff, on the actually
yeah,
how it's made. And I think they're going to be more on that on the production processes will be greener. A lot more on the robotics side, on the production, on the manufacturing side, robotic welding. I mean, I'm seeing that increasingly now, and it's only going to grow. I was in Northern Ireland last year, and I went to Power Screen's new HQ, saw their huge investment in robotic welding on their HQ site in Dungannon. That was very interesting. AI will be far more relevant than it is now. Health and safety, there will be big gains. So yeah, I think it will move rapidly on, and in five
yeah,
years' time, there will be big notable differences on sites.
yeah. And what's one quiet shift you think will matter more than people realize?
I think arguably you could say the health and safety will be the quiet big gain. As I say, it doesn't
Yeah,
always grab the headlines, but a lot of good work is being done. Again, there's been some major projects in Europe with the likes of Digi Eco Quarry rotate. A lot of it, some EU funding in various EU bodies, and Aggregates Europe playing a central role, the industry association, where they've got majors doing a lot of work in this area on sensors on machines to drive efficiencies and such, like less humans more safely. So I think that might be the quiet win, the health and safety side, the big gains that can be had, through the adoption of greater circularity and digitalisation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Guy. And with that last question, it's time to wrap up. Guy, thank you so much for joining me on the Breaking Ground podcast. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in and listening. Make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.